which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolte?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
Very good. That brings us to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion related to approval of this evening's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
Motion has been made for the approval of this evening's agenda. We'll open it up for discussion. Are there any changes, any additions, deletions, or any other changes that would like to be proposed?
No, thank you.
Okay. Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
That brings us to meeting schedule. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, the next scheduled meeting of the Commission will be a work session which will take place on Wednesday, October the 20th at 2 p.m. in this meeting room.
Thank you. That brings us to honorary resolutions. We have listed Eagle Scout honorary resolutions, but that was, I think, something that is going to need to be put off for a couple of weeks. So if we have unanimous consent of the commission, we will just bring that up at the appropriate time, and it'll appear on our agenda later on.
Sounds good.
Very good. Discussion items, there are none listed. Public hearings. That brings us to our consent agenda. Is there a motion related to tonight's consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as published.
Motion has been made for the approval of this evening's consent agenda. I would remind commissioners and those who are watching and the public that any item on the consent agenda may be removed by any commissioner leading up to this moment. So if there's there are any changes to the consent agenda, I would entertain those. Seeing none, is there any further comment? Commissioner Carpenter, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
That concludes our consent agenda. That brings us to our regular agenda. First on that list is 2021-274. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-274 is a request to approve the distribution of 2020 flood control release funds. This is a request from the treasurer, and the treasurer Nance is here for any further comments if he wishes to make.
Thank you, Commissioner Tom Nance, Clay County Treasurer. This money, which is approximately $24,000, is given by the Corps of Engineers to reimburse school districts that lost tax revenue because of federally required lands.
Very good. This is something, of course, that we had some discussion about last week, so I think commissioners are familiar with this particular resolution. Is there a motion related, or are there any questions of the treasurer before we go forward?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Is there a resolution, or excuse me, is there a motion related to 2021-274?
I'll make a motion to approve 2021-274.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2021-274. Discussion. Commissioner Carpenter?
No discussion.
Is there any member of the public who would care to make any comment on this subject this time? Seeing none, there's no further discussion. Commissioner Thompson, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
That brings us to 2021-282. Mr. Administrator?
Commissioners, 2021-282 is a request to approve the American Rescue Plan Act funding request relative to the Clay County Public Health Center. This request by the auditor, who is here for additional comments.
Mr. Auditor, when you're prepared, please proceed.
Good evening, Commission. Yes, Victor Hurlbert, Clay County Auditor. Just to revisit, as we discussed in our work session last week, in Resolution 2021-282 is to approve the request from the Clay County Public Health Center for American Rescue Plan Act funds. As we detailed, it amounts through 2024 of $4.8 million, $655,000 for reimbursable costs for 2021, and we will include the respective 2022 amounts in the budget for 2022. Again, the process here is reviewing those expenditures to make sure they're eligible and everything is accurate before we release payments. And of course, when you look at the guidance for the American Rescue Plan Act, besides for infrastructure, really everything has to have a tie to COVID. And of course, the Public Health Center and the work they do related to the pandemic is certainly an eligible expenditure from that extent. So I noticed the Health Center is here tonight to make any further comment from commission requests or more information about this beyond what we have already discussed.
Thank you. By the way, we did, as you say, talk about this last week. Clearly we have a general notion here as to what the expenses would be used for. Just to confirm, these are expenses that you feel, having studied the American Recovery Plan Act, these seem to be in order as far as a viable and qualified expenditures.
Yes, certainly. They all, deal with responding directly to the COVID-19 pandemic. They list out 9 subcategories within those, and those subcategories are also approved as far as payroll costs for health center workers or those dedicated to responding to the pandemic, as well as the supplies and materials beyond the personnel costs. So those are eligible, as well as public health expenses. But we get to look at these again as they're submitted, and if we have a question, we can take that up at that time. So what this is approving is that overall encumbrance or obligation that we can, go up to and not exceed. And we have a strong relationship with the Health Center from our work with the CARES Act, as well as Operation Safe, of to get the documentation we need for our own single audit to ensure that compliance for any federal dollars.
And you had mentioned the CARES Act funding. Has all that money that was allocated towards the health department, the health centers, been expended as far as you know?
Yes, it has.
And do we have the documentation in order for us to be able, for lack of a better way to put it, close the books on that particular fund in this particular case that we used for the health centers?
Yeah, we have all the documentation we need on the on the CARES Act. For the Operation Safe, we're still working through that, getting all the documentation we need. We're just about done. And then so I imagine, it'll be pending approval, this would be an ongoing process to continue that cooperation. But what I like about this, because it's a longer timeline again, over a few years, it's just to have that beforehand, before we release payment, is a better approach than just trying to chase it down, because we actually got pretty close to the deadline with the CARES Act, getting all the documentation from all the constituent partners that we worked with. So I think this will be a better approach for the county.
I agree with you. One of the things that disturbed me about the method by which we distributed CARES Act funding was that it was given in advance of the expenditures. My preference would be the way we're doing it now, which is the entity would, in this case, health centers, would submit documentation to to verify their expenses, and then we would be reimbursing. That strikes me as a better check and a balance, because at the end of the day, of course, the county is responsible for the compliant expenditure of these funds. Okay. Further questions? Does anybody else have any questions of the auditor?
No, thank you.
Very well. As you say, the executive director of the health centers is here. If you'd like to speak, that would be fine. Does anybody here have any questions of Mr. Zabarak?
No.
No? Very well. Any further discussion? Well, I should say, before we start on that, I do need a motion at this point for us to go ahead and open discussion more broadly. Is there a motion related to 2021-282?
Commissioner, if I could ask County Council, what I'm going to propose is that we do a 2-week delay on this and move it to next week's work schedule. Okay. I'm looking for your advice in terms of what the motion should be to effectuate that.
Oh, go ahead and turn your mic, please.
I would just probably suggest a motion to place this on the work session for the 20th. probably just to that date certain would be probably the simplest way to do it as a motion.
Well, that'll be my motion. So moved to place it on next week's work session.
Very well. Motion is on the floor to put 2021-282 onto the works session next week, next Wednesday at 2 p.m.
And I'd love to offer comment if that's appropriate at this time.
Once I
Very
just
good.
restated, so yeah, now please go ahead
you.
and proceed on your motion.
So we got an email about 4 hours ago outlining some of the ways that the $4.8 million would be spent, which I do appreciate from the health department. This is a big enough issue in terms of lives and in terms of almost $5 million that I'd like a little bit more than 4 hours of time to review and ask questions and get them answered. Speak with the health department, talk with county staff. I'd also love to talk some with the auditor in terms of doing this over a multi-year time frame is. It feels like a little bit of a departure from what we normally do in terms of guaranteeing funding. So I got a number of questions, and I think a couple weeks would be helpful to me if it's amenable to my fellow commissioners to further study the issue, maybe have a little more back and forth in terms of getting questions answered. I think if we do it 2 weeks from now or some modified version of it 2 weeks from now, I think, in my view, it won't cause any harm. So.
I've got to say, I support what you're saying, particularly the idea of it coming up at our next work session gives us more of a chance to discuss it. And there are two things I think that make what you're suggesting a good idea. The first one is clearly we're dealing with a substantial amount of money, and I think this increases our ability to do our due diligence. Secondarily, this is the larger pot of money that we are dealing with is going to be bringing in other requests. So this might be a good opportunity for us to work through the method by which we process these requests. So we're using this as kind of our alpha version. Might be easier as we process and consider other requests. Does that sound kind of what you have in mind?
It does, and I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, do you have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Commissioner. I agree that putting this off until the 20th is probably appropriate. This is a pretty big issue, and we want to make sure that we all feel comfortable and have consensus moving forward. So I'm okay with that.
I do want to say we certainly appreciate the additional information that we've gotten. I think that's a positive thing. We certainly appreciate Mr. Zabarak being here and representing the health centers so that if there are any questions that they can be placed to him. However, the motion on the floor right now does not have to do with the underlying bill so much as the disposal of it. So the question before us is one of scheduling, not the merits of 2021-282. Mr. Commissioner, Counselor.
Yeah, and I apologize, Commissioners. I guess I just have a little inquiry on this. And really the initial question is 1 week enough? That's only 1 week from today. It would come back on for first read. So I guess consider that. And in part, the reason I asked that question is I have heard a rumor that at least one of our hospitals may be coming forward very soon, and maybe both, with similar request under this money. I don't know if you'd want to take them all up together, knowing what each request is going to be before you start encumbering part of it, knowing I think that there are going to be, I would assume, 3 fairly sizable requests coming. I don't know if you would want that information and take them up together just so you have an idea, or you want to take them up piecemeal. And again, I'm not suggesting an outcome, but just wanted to raise that as a point.
Would it be a thought to maybe postpone it to a date less definite, and that way, if we feel we can then go ahead and schedule?
I'm totally comfortable with doing that.
But
yes.
it's your motion.
Sure, as long as you both are as well. I certainly don't need a date certain. Allowing some flexibility on, again, it's an important enough issue, and if more information is to come, I think allowing flexibility makes sense to me.
I'll go ahead and restate what I take to be your motion, and you correct me if I'm inaccurate. Motion has been made that 2021-282 be postponed to a future work session so that we might consider the issue more thoroughly.
To withdraw that previous motion and adopt the new motion?
I withdraw the previous motion and adopt the motion as stated.
Very good. Having restated it, we will ask again if there's any discussion within the commission on this. Okay. Is there any comment from anyone from the public? I see no comments. Commissioner Carpenter, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. That brings us to 2021, three companion issues, actually, 2021-267, 268, and 269. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-267 and 268 and 269 are all a request to approve addendum agreements and a fiber service order renewal and a LIT service order agreement. All of this with Unite Private Networks, all of which is requested by IT, and our Information Technology Manager is here for further comment.
Please proceed.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Kevin Shaw, the IT Director for Clay County. Today, before you, we have 267 as an addendum to a previous resolution. 268 is for renewal, and 269 is for new service. We talked about this a little bit at the work session. I could go into more detail now. Everything is budgeted, so that is one of the financial pieces of this, that it is under budget.
Very good. Are there any questions of the IT manager from the commission?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Very well. Is there a motion related to 2021-267, 268, and 269?
I'll make a motion to approve 267, 268, and 269.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2021-267, 2021-268, 2021-269. Discussion? Commissioner Carpenter?
No discussion.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this issue at this time? Seeing none, Commissioner Thompson, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Yes.
That brings us to 2021-285. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-285 is a request to approve a statutorily mandated post-transition audit for the Clay County Collector's Office submitted by administration. Again, this is mandated by statute. The key element of this is within that, the cost of the audit will be borne by the county. There's a range in there of somewhere between $20,000 and $35,000, and the state has indicated that they would, of course, distribute that final cost when they actually complete the audit.
Very good. Are there any questions of the administrator on 2021-285? Seeing none. Is there a motion related to 2021-285?
I move that we approve 2021-285.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2021-285. Discussion? Commissioner Thompson.
No, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public who would care to comment on this issue at this time? Seeing none, Commissioner Carpenter, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
That brings us to 2021-242. Mr. Administrator.
Commissioners, 2021-242 is a request, or an appointment, I should say, of members to the Clay County Redistricting Commission. This is a commission action, and I will turn the floor back over to you for any further comment, Mr. Presiding.
Thank you. Yes, these are the names under nomination right now for the Clay County Redistricting Commission. That commission is required of us by our new constitution. These are the names that have been put forward. I think the commissioners have received, should have received certainly the applications and when attached resumes of these individuals. So with that, I will open it up for discussion. Are there any questions, comments, or any other discussion on this issue?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
No, no comment. Thanks.
Very good. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this item? Very well. I will make a motion for the approval of 2021-242. Discussion. We just had that. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
That concludes our regular agenda tonight. That brings us to comments on non-agenda items. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on any items not appearing on this evening's agenda? Seeing none. Are there any office holders who would like to comment on any items not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none. Are there any agencies who have any comments on subjects other than those on this evening's agenda? Seeing none. Mr. Administrator, do you have any comments you'd like to make at this time?
I do not, thank you.
Commissioner comments. Commissioner Thompson, do you have any comments?
I don't, thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Just that I appreciate the collaboration that goes on in this commission, and so thank you to both of you.
I do have one comment that I would like to make. I would like to remind people that certainly the cornerstone of our representative democracy is, in fact, the vote. There is an election coming up on November 2nd. It doesn't have a lot of items on it, therefore it could be easily overlooked. But the importance of it is absolutely vital, in my opinion, for this county. That the main issue that I would refer to on the November 2nd ballot would be the renewal of the tax, the sales tax, to help support our sheriff's department. I think that is without doubt a vitally important thing, not just that we show the support I think that our sheriff and all law enforcement deserve, but from a financial point of view, this tax raises something on the order of $5 million, which could not be easily replaced. And so passage of this particular issue is of great importance to our county and to our surrounding communities. I would encourage all voters to read these issues through carefully, show up on November 2nd and cast your ballot. I would also encourage any other elected officials or people of influence to make sure that that word is spread. I was at a Chamber of Commerce lunch today and certainly made sure that that they were made aware that this issue was coming up. So once again, I would encourage everyone to make sure that that word does get out and citizens take the opportunity to exercise their right to vote in a matter particularly of this importance. That brings us to approval of the minutes of previous sessions. I see none listed. Written reports, are there any written reports? No written reports at this time. We do not have any executive sessions listed for this evening. That brings us to number 18 on our agenda, which is adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you.